All right, welcome everyone to E-Rate for experienced filers / veterans. And hopefully you got the handouts. They are on the event site if you don't have them handy yet. Lori, the floor is all yours.
All right, let's see. Christine, do you want to make me host so I can share my screen? Do I have that ability? Yeah, not yet. All right, there we go.
I think we've established, yep. Yeah, I don't have to make you host. You can just share. There we go.
Perfect. Yeah, like I said, we were chatting earlier. My version of Zoom is a little bit different, so a little different functionality. So good morning, everyone. As Christine said, I'm Lori Gurman. I think I know most of you looking at the list of participants. And today we're making assumptions that you are indeed a veteran or experienced filer. We're not going to get as much in the weeds on like the purpose of the various forms. But as we go through it, don't hesitate. Most of this we do once a year, and trying to remember from one year to the next, some of the fields on the forms, the purpose of the forms. So, don't hesitate to ask questions. So just a quick agenda here. And Christine, I'm going to be sending you when we finish an updated copy. I did slip an additional slide in. I'll point that one out. But then I just realized looking at the agenda, it of course changed my slide numbers a little bit. So I'm going to be updating this and sending you a corrected copy. All right, so for our agenda this morning, with E-Rate, anybody who's been filing for a while, we have all this overlap, right? So it's typical to be dealing with up to 3 funding years at any given time. So here we are, to talk about the upcoming funding year, but we're actually starting by talking about the previous funding year, the current funding year, then moving into the new funding year. All right, so we'll talk about completing funding year 2023. Where are we at with 2024? And then preparing for 2025. We'll talk about just a few things as far as preparing for the funding year. Then we'll talk about the new things, okay? The program updates. I will go through some program process reminders. And then we're going to end the morning talking about the Cybersecurity Pilot. Now, if you are interested, giving you a little heads up here. When we talk about program updates, I'm going to be spending quite a bit of time talking about the off-premise hotspots, because I know that's really a hot topic for most of our libraries. So you're going to be getting lots of information about the off-premise hotspot program. Okay, so completing 2023. Remember, with E-Rate, we always classify the funding year based on when the services typically start. So funding year 2023 started July 1, 23, ended June 30th, 2024. Because of the way some of the deadlines fall, you may still need to file the reimbursement form for 2023. All right, so let's just jump right in, because again, this is the item for 23 that's most pressing right now. It's getting the reimbursement. We start this process months before the start of the funding year, applying and asking for funding. And then on the back end of the funding year, we ask for the reimbursement. Right. So with the reimbursement, the deadline for recurring service, your bandwidth, right, with the services you receive on a month-to-month basis. Because the service end date, the end of the funding year is June 30th, we have 120 days from that date to file for the reimbursement. Whether we're filing as an applicant and filing what's called the bearer form, or the service provider filing the SPI, the service provider invoice on your behalf, if they've given you discounted bills. This is actually the invoicing deadline, regardless of the invoicing form. So October 28th is that deadline. You want to make sure, go back, check to make sure, have you received all the funds you were expecting to receive? If not, you need to file the bearer. Now, non-recurring services or purchases, that would be if you ask, say, for internal connections under category 2, for any hardware where that's a one-time purchase, right? That's considered non-recurring. The way the program works, they give us 90 additional days on the back end of the funding year to get that equipment purchased, get that installed. Because that date was pushed back to September 30th to get that done, that also pushes back the invoicing deadline. So for anything that's considered non-recurring, we have until January 28th, 120 days from September 30th. So January 28th, 2025, to get that filed. Now, in the portal, we do have the ability to ask for an invoice extension. And this is something I strongly recommend you do, even if you're able to go in and file the bear form by that October 28th date. It's something I just summarily do, all right? Because if, let's say you file a bear and you realize after the fact, or maybe once you get a denial, that you made a mistake on that bear form, right? By asking for the extension, you can do it one time for each funding request. It basically pushes that deadline out another 120 days. So that would give you until February 25th. So go ahead and ask for the extension. There's no harm in doing that. If you don't need the extra time, it just saves you a lot of heartburn if your bear is rejected and you have to go back in and refile. If you don't get the extension, then you have to file an appeal with the FCC. That could be long, drawn out, and a little painful. So it only takes just a couple of minutes to ask for that extension. All right. Down at the bottom of the page, if you have the copy of the presentation, you'll see the hyperlink there. Out on my resource page. Let me pull that up real quick here. Let me see if I can get there fairly easily. This is my resource library. I've put everything having to do with the Cybersecurity Pilot here at the top. But if you scroll down, you'll start seeing all of the E-rate resources. All right. And I put together, it's about a 5-6 slide, little step-by-step guide on how to ask for the extension. Like I said, it's really quick, easy to do. Do yourself a favor, all right, and get that done. I was doing some training yesterday, and it was for newbies, all right, for beginners. And a young man mentioned that he had filed a bear back early in October, but it still hadn't been paid out. And he hadn't received any review questions. And so after the training, he shared a slide with me, and I'm looking at his bear form, and he put in the right, funding year. He put in the correct, 471 and funding request number. All of that was right. But when it asked for the service start date, he put July 1, 2024, when it should have been July 1, 2023, which means USAC's going to reject his bear form. So the first thing we did is like, okay, before you reach out to USAC, before we create a help desk ticket or whatever, you need to go in and get that extension because you're going to have to refile it. All right. But again, didn't even pay attention, that he had put an incorrect date there, and the system didn't kick it back. All right. It still let him submit that bear, but it's going to get, denied, and he'll have to refile it. All right. So hope that, kind of pounded that in, make sure to get that extension requested. All right. But again, let me know if you have any questions on that bear. Now, with the bear form, this actually, I'm bringing this up because the new bear system, we just started using this last fall. So it's still, pretty new for most of us. Just remember that in order to access the new bear, it's called Epic Invoicing. You're not going to see anything initially that says bear form. All right. To get to that, on the blue menu bar, once you're logged in, sitting at the landing page, up in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see that series of tiles, the 3/3 there. All right. Click on the tiles, and you'll see Epic Invoice, providing you've been given access to the form. If you click on the tiles and you don't see Epic Invoice, then you need to get with your account administrator, or if you happen to be the account administrator, go into Manage User Permissions and give yourself full rights to the bear form. All right, because again, if it's not showing up, simply means you don't have rights to that particular application. Now, out on the resource page, there's also an excellent guide that some of my SECA, a colleague, another state coordinator, put together on filing a bear, and she shared it, with everyone. So, we're all making it available. It's a pretty extensive guide, all right, but it will walk you through, filing the bear form if you've not done this before. Now, with this new version, there are some changes, such as error checks. There are a lot of mistakes you might make on that form. It's going to pop up with an error message. Unfortunately, as the young man found out yesterday, if you put the wrong start date, all right, it's not going to catch that. So pay close attention, because remember, if you're filing a bear, say for that recurring service for 2023, then the service start date would be July 1, 2023, the start of that funding year. All right, but like I said, the system won't kick that back as an error. The big change with this new version, we're now allowed to put multiple funding requests on the same form, even if it's different providers. Under the old version, which we referred to being on Old Bessie, the old system, all right, with that one, you had to file a bear per service provider. All right, so you may be filing, 2 or 3, 4 of these. All right, so with this new version, doesn't matter, if it's multiple providers, you can put all of that on the same form. If it's category 1 request and a category 2, you can put, all of that on the same application. Not a problem. There are a series of tabs once you get into the invoicing portal. You can see all of your previously submitted forms, any pending tasks, if there are any review questions, right? Because again, with this new version, the reviewers now have the ability to communicate with us. Under the old system, under Old Bessie, that was not an option. We can also upload vendor invoices. You'll see the option to click on a button to upload. I'm recommending that you not initially upload, because sometimes that can lead to additional review questions that otherwise you wouldn't have gotten. Wait for the reviewer to ask, say for an invoice. All right, I would not, just automatically upload those. Because oftentimes when you submit a bear, they'll just go ahead and process it without really going in and double checking. It varies depending on the, on the request. So again, don't automatically upload. Wait for the reviewer to come back, and ask for it. We can also get real-time status reports by funding request number. All right, so they'll come in and say, okay, for this specific funding request, this is going on. This one's been processed. So they may do a partial reimbursement. They're not going to hold up all of your, all of your reimbursement if they have questions, with one specific funding request. So again, that's another improvement. But you can go in and get real-time status. Is this form incomplete, or this, this reimbursement incomplete? Has the form been certified? Has it been processed? Was it canceled? Right. So again, you can see all of that. Also, the ability to see, whether the bear has been paid. So again, lots of improvements here. If something was denied or partially, maybe it was reduced, a lot more explanation to help us understand, did you make a mistake? So that's why something got denied. They'll give you specific reasons why that happened. The biggest pitfall, just so that you're aware, all right, with this form, when you go in, you have to select the funding year. Which funding year are you asking for reimbursement? It automatically defaults to the current funding year. Well, most bears that we're filing right now are for 2023. So for each, if you have multiple funding requests, each time you go to add a funding request on the form, you have to remember to go back up and click on 2023 for the funding year. All right. It's one of those things that catches me just about every time. All right. So that's the biggest pitfall. Again, it's going to automatically default and show you only the items for 2024. So make sure you go up, click on the pull down, change the funding year. Now, the URL here at the bottom, USAC, they're using what they call open data. All right. It's their public facing database. If you go out to this URL, go out to open data, they do have a really good data set called the E-rate invoice disbursement data lookup. That's a mouthful. All right. But it's going to show you all of your funding requests. You can, go in, put in your billed entity number and say, show me everything for 2023. And it's going to show you your funding request, how much has been paid. Was it paid by a bear, or did your service provider file a SPY? It's going to show you that information. It will also show you the last date to invoice. So if an invoice extension's been requested, all right, and that's been approved, then it will change it from the October 28th date to February 25th. And, keep in mind, when you go into the system to ask for an extension, this isn't something you have to wait on. The system will automatically apply it. You're going to get immediate notification. As soon as you hit submit, all right, you enter the funding request number, you want extended, you click on submit, it's immediately going to come back with a table saying, okay, here's the new invoice date. It's not something you have to wait, several days for USAC to process. When you use, just a heads up, when you use this lookup though, if you filed a BEAR or your service provider has filed a SPI, anything pending, right, where USAC hasn't processed it yet, that will not show up. It'll still show as if, nothing's been done to request reimbursement. So don't panic if you look at that and you see that zero's been dispersed and you filed the form. It just means that USAC hasn't, completed that process. Now, some of this information, okay, I'm just going to be, going through saying, okay, here's a new thing to be aware of. And I don't have like dividing slides to transition, okay? But I do want to make you aware, something that we're seeing right now is a service certification. And as applicants, we're seeing this most often when our service provider files the SPI, that service provider invoice. So USAC is verifying that because the service provider gave you a discounted bill, they want to make sure, did you pay your non-discounted portion? So if you're at an 80% discount rate, you should have received an invoice for the 20% of the cost. So again, they're making sure that you paid that 20%, whatever that percentage is, all right, what was the amount and the date it was paid. Again, making that, just certifying all of that information. Now, if you get this request, I'm going to show you what it looks like. It comes in an email, and in the email, it tells you you have 7 days to respond. If you don't get this back within the 7 days, then USAC can basically deny or cancel that SPI request. And then the service provider has to go in and refile. And they're not really happy when they have to do that. All right, so you need to respond, pretty quick on these. Now, one of the other issues that we've experienced with this new service certification is only a user, all right, in the portal that has full rights. Those are the only individuals who can sign and date this certification. Now, this sounds kind of silly. Let's say maybe your fiscal officer is the account administrator, but your or the full right user in the portal, but your director signs the form. If your director isn't listed as a user with full rights in the portal, they're going to kick it back and say, no, this individual, even though they're the director of the library system, they're not authorized to sign this. All right. So when this, first we started seeing this, we're all kind of scratching our heads. Well, they're the director. I mean, of course they're, they're authorized to, provide this information. It's coming down to, does that individual have a portal account and do they have full rights? So again, just a heads up there. So this is what the email will look like. It's a little intimidating when you read through it because it's saying, here's all the information that we need. But there will be a Word document attached to that. All right, and this is what that looks like. Now, some of these fields will be, already filled out for us, auto-populated. Invoice number, that's not the invoice number, when your provider invoiced you. The invoice number here is the number that the USAC system, the invoicing system, assigned to that SPI. All right, every time you submit a form, it's going to, assign an application number to it. All right, anything having to do with invoice, they call it an invoice number instead of an application number. So again, that should be pre-populated for you, the name of the provider, the undiscounted amount, and then when we drop down to 10, 11, 12, the billed entity number, the 471, the funding request number, that should be filled out for you. All right, but if you come up to items 7, 8, and 9, what's the applicant name? The applicant name is the name of the library system, or the, if you're an independent library, the name of the person making the authorization, and your contact info. All right, but the big piece that they're really looking for, items 13, 14, and 15. So the dates the goods or the services were delivered. All right, so it would be like the service start date. If it was for equipment, when was it installed? So if it's if there's an installation date, but this is for, say, your bandwidth, you would leave that that date blank. All right, that would just be if this was for a request for equipment. All right, and then 15, the really biggie here, the date the applicant portion was paid, all right, and the check number. So they're wanting to know that information to verify that, yep, this has been paid. But it also says, or date that you will pay. All right, typically by time a service provider is filing this, you've already paid those invoices. All right, so again, just be prepared so you understand what they're looking for. And then down at the bottom of the page, again, you're going to put the representative name. This is where you sign it. All right, and then date it. So the name listed here needs to be that full right user in the portal. So let me know if you have any questions there, because again, this one's caused a little bit of heartburn for both applicants and, say, if it's the service provider, going through this SPI process. All right, so that should help you close out, what's going on, for 2023. Finish out that funding year. So let's look at our current funding year, 2024. So this would be for services beginning July 1, 2024. So where are we at in that process? All right, just to give you just a snapshot, this is, as our state for both schools and libraries, where are we at, with funding approvals? So as a state, we had just shy of 3,100 funding requests submitted. Right, and it was totaling $87.7 million. This is something I report at the state level often, because our state legislatures, whatever, want to know, the impact of E-rate. All right, so pre-discount $87.7 million, or actually that's a funding level, and then 67.6 million that's been funded to date. Okay, so we're not quite there yet. Okay, we still have a few FRNs out there waiting to get approval. This year, because right after the close of the 471 window, the FCC told USAC, we're modifying the review process, all right, and the kinds of information you need to gather. All right, so they did this after USAC had already reviewed a lot of applications. In my duties as state coordinator for the schools, I write validation letters, validating the enrollment numbers and their lunch numbers. And I had already, at the time this change took place, I had already written 160 validation letters. And then the FCC came back and said, nope, we're not going to accept letters from state coordinators anymore unless they include this additional information. So all of those applications that had already gone into review, been validated, sitting there waiting for a funding letter, all those applications went back into review again. So everything's been delayed a bit this year. It's really impacted. So like the Oakland applications that we filed, they haven't been approved yet, because they're still waiting on some of the school information to be processed to calculate correct discount rates. All right, so it has definitely been this domino effect. So just so you know, that did occur this year. So if you're still waiting on a funding decision, that could be the reason it's being held up. All right, now when we look at what's been funded to date, just a little over 31 million. All right, was funded for category 2. So as I said, we're still waiting on about 209 funding requests that are pending for 65 entities, and about 45 of those funding requests are Oaklands. All right, so that a little frustration there. No, a lot of frustration. Okay, so just so you know, this is where we stand as a state, and it's not unique to Ohio, obviously. This is, we're feeling this nationwide. Okay, now when we look at, the steps in the process, once you receive your funding decision, the next step is filing that Form 486. That's where you're indicating that services have started, I'm getting ahead of my slide here, but just so you understand, and also whether you're SEPA compliant or not. Right now, I looked at this about a week and a half ago. There were still 424 funding requests that have not been listed on a 486 yet. All right, so you need to go back and make sure, did I get that 486 filed? Okay, now my note here in red at the bottom, if you filed what we call a post-commitment change, maybe you made a clerical error and you put down the wrong SPIN, the wrong service provider identification number. Maybe you were asking for some equipment, but the model you originally asked for has changed, not available, so you filed a service substitution, or maybe you filed an appeal with USAC. All right, if you have filed that and it's been 60 days and there's been no movement, USAC is recommending, this is a statement from USAC, they're recommending that you go into the portal, create a customer service case. You'll click where it says contact us, right? And then just explain, I filed for this, post-commitment change, and it's been, 60 days, 70 days, whatever. And, I haven't received a decision yet. Can you give me an update? Sometimes, doing that, it will get things moving. So again, it may escalate it. Okay, so a little more on that 486. So with the with the funding letters, if you've not received all of your funding decisions yet, make sure you go into Epic, drill down to the 471, click on review status, make sure there are no review questions sitting in the portal where USAC's waiting on you to provide some information. All right. Now, if you did receive a review inquiry and you responded, and it's been, let's say, a month since you've done that, and there's no movement, let me know that, or let Christine know that. We can reach out to USAC to say, hey, can you give us an update? Again, sometimes that will escalate it. And depending on the issue, we can actually reach out to the PIA regional manager. All right, I have that contact information. Sometimes we can get them involved, because sometimes it's down to the individual reviewer, and that's where the issue is. All right, so again, just let us know if that's happening. If you did receive the funding letter, did you check it over? Did you make sure everything was correct? If you look at it and you realize that there is something, maybe something was denied or reduced, something that you weren't expecting at all, remember, you have 60 days from the date the letter was issued to file an appeal. All right, not when you finally got around to looking at it. It's the date that USAC issued it. All right, 60 days from that date. All right, but again, you want to make sure that there are no surprises. Okay, go in and check all of that. Okay, now I mentioned about the 486. This is where you indicate SEPA compliance. Of all the forms, this is the easiest to file. If you check all the correct boxes, usually within about 3 to 4 minutes, you'll receive an email. It'll say Form 486 notification. All right, you'll get an initial email saying 486 was certified. You're looking for the email, though, that says 486 notification. That means it's actually been approved. All right. And the reason that's so important, making sure it gets approved, is if you're asking, say, for discounted billing, your service provider cannot file for the reimbursement until you file the 486 and it's been approved. Right. So again, just some heads up there. Make sure, go in and, check the information. Now, if you did apply under Category 2 for internal connections, and maybe you're in a construction project and you're not ready to get the equipment on site and and get that installed. When we file the 486, there's no harm in going ahead and saying, yep, we're starting this service for this hardware. All right, because the deadline to file the 486 for the funding request is the service start date. But if it's going to be another 3-4 months before you get that equipment installed, then you have to remember to go back after that and file the 486 if you decide to wait. All right, there's no harm in going ahead and saying, yep, we intend to, move forward with buying the equipment. if something happens where, let's say, the construction project gets, delayed, far longer than you could expect, you could still go in and cancel the funding request if you needed to. Again, it does no harm in going ahead and putting it on the form. Now, of course, you cannot file this 486 until you get a funding letter. I've heard from some applicants, where they put on their calendar, okay, in October, make sure you get that 486 filed. They go in to do that and they don't even have the option, all right? Because you cannot do this until you get the funding decision. Now, with the 486, I always refer to this deadline for this particular form as a moving target. All right. All of the other forms, it's a fixed deadline where we all have the same deadline. With the 486, it depends on when, the date of your funding letter or when that service started. All right. So just remember, go back, check the date on the funding letter. Any funding letter dated, on or before July 1st, all of those funding decisions have the same 486 deadline. It's October 29th. So the way this is calculated, it's the date of your funding letter or the service start date, okay, whichever is the later date. USAC actually started issuing, putting out funding letters around mid-April. Okay, some of the very first letters went out about mid-April. So there were quite a few funding letters issued by July 1st. So regardless of the date of your letter, all right, as long as if it was any date before July 1st, the 120-day countdown starts with July 1st. So you have until October 29th to get the 486 filed. Now, this is also the only form, because again, this one is a moving target. This is the only form where USAC will send you a notification when if you miss the deadline, saying, hey, you missed this, and they'll give you 10 more days to get it filed. All right, but this is the only form where that happens. So again, go in, check the dates of the letter. Now, if your funding letter was dated, let's say September 1st, then you have 120 days from September 1st. But of course, you don't have to wait to the end of the 120 days. All right, get it done as soon as possible. Now, out on my website, I have, there's lots of different guides out there. I have one, that will step you through filing the 486 because there are those SEPA certifications. You want to make sure, are you SEPA compliant? If you are, make sure you select the correct, certification option there. Again, let me know if you have any questions. Okay, I think we're good there. All right, so let's start talking about 2025. So this will be for services starting July 1, 2025 through June 30th, 2026. All right, so each year we have this period of time called the admin window. For the schools, this is more pressing because the schools have to go in, every year and update their enrollment and their lunch counts, right? They do the work, all right, but then it impacts our libraries. So I would wait until after the close of the admin window to go in and check your discount rate, because depending on what those counts, are for the schools will impact your discount rate. All right. But again, during the admin window, it's much easier for libraries. So this window did open, though, on October 15th, and it will close early mid-January. We don't have the dates yet for the 471 window, but the FCC told us it should be about the same as what we've seen, in the last several years, meaning it would open around mid-January, close, mid-latter March. All right, so the admin window typically closes 2 to 3 days before that 471 window will open. So again, schools are in there, getting this information updated. For libraries, the most pressing is making sure that all of your entities are in the portal. So if you have a new library branch, if you have what we call a non-instructional facility, say a separate data center, an administrative building, something that is not open to patrons, all right, but those we are we consider those NIFs, non-instructional facilities. All right. So if you're getting services for those buildings, they need to be listed in the portal. Make sure, go into the portal, look under by entities, make sure all the sites are listed. If you have a new bookmobile, if you're doing, I know like in Ross County, they have their book hive, all right, where they get internet access for those sites. Make sure that they're listed as entities in the portal. The other piece libraries really need, and this year it's more important than ever, make sure that you go to each library site if you have multiple branches and verify the square footage. In the past, we stressed square footage if you were applying for Category 2 funding, and a lot of our libraries, have not filed for that because of the SEPA requirement. All right, but the off-premise hotspots, the amount of funding that you qualify for that is tied to your square footage. So even if you're not going to apply for Cat 2, you still need to make sure that you update that square footage information. All right, now I've got a little, breadcrumb here at the bottom to remind you how to do that. You have to, if you have multiple branches, you click on each branch independently, all right, to update their data. So you simply go to the landing page, click on the library name, then up in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see the option to click on Manage Organization. You'll scroll down and you'll see a field that says square footage. So if it's, set at 0, put the correct square footage in there. If you've, had some construction done and expanded, one of your branch locations, update that square footage there. All right, because you want that correct if you're going to apply for the off-premise hotspots. Now, just a heads up, when you plug in that updated number and you click on submit, anytime you make a change just about in this program, it's going to come back and say, okay, give it a nickname. All right, so when I do that, I just say square footage. All right, it's just for your benefit to be able to go back and look up changes. All right, to help you understand, specifically what that change was. But again, let me know if you have questions there on the square footage. Okay, something else I want to make you aware of quickly here. USAC has posted some FAQs on EPIC issues, some of the known issues, just to make you aware, because the one at the bottom I've been experiencing numerous times over the last several weeks. All right, but again, just to give you a heads up, let's jump up to the first one. It is very specific about the browsers that it will work with. All right, Chrome works fine. Firefox, I was using Firefox, but I was having so many issues with the portal, I changed to Chrome. USAC is saying that Firefox is working, all right? But if you go to log in, every time you log into the portal, it's going to ask for the multi-factor authentication code, all right, that MFA. If it doesn't like your browser, when you put in the code, all right, and you click on continue, it just loops back to the login page. It just keeps looping. If you experience that, all right, it's probably because of the browser you're using. USAC's recommendation, while they say that they support Chrome, Firefox, and Edge, Safari is very problematic, all right? USAC says make sure that your browser is set to allow for third-party cookies. I've tried going in, clearing out my cache, whatever. I just, like I said, I just wound up switching from Firefox to Chrome to make it happy. Okay, just a heads up there. If you get that looping, that's what's going on. Now, if you are using Chrome, make sure that you're not using the incognito mode or private windows. Again, the portal doesn't like that at all. Now, the second issue, I've not really experienced this, but some folks have. If you go to log in, you put in the MFA code, you may get what looks, this white screen with this error message right across the top that says the JWT was issued in the future. That simply means that the time on your whatever, CPU that you're using, desktop, laptop, whatever system you're using, that the time is off by 2 minutes or more. All right. So if you get this error message, go in and, adjust the time on your system. So again, that's all it's saying is that the time is incorrect. But again, this last one I'm seeing often. It's an error message, same thing. You get the solid white screen with the error message right across the top, where it'll say unable to parse a token from the URL. All right. So what USAC, they're working on fixing it, but in the meantime, they're saying to get around it, go up to the URL, to that address line, click on it one time so that it's highlighted. And while it's highlighted, click on Control F5. All right. And that will take you to the dashboard, to the typical view. So then you can click on Epic. Okay, so again, I've been getting lots of questions around this, saying, Lori, I keep getting this parsing error. I can't get into the portal. All right, so again, click, so you highlight the URL, Control F5, and it will let you move on. Biggest issue is remembering that. Okay, so let's get into the meat of what's new for 2025. So let's start off with category 2. So if you are applying, if you're SEPA compliant or in the process of becoming SEPA compliant, category 2 funding, the way Cat 2 funds work, it's a 5-year budget cycle. And the current cycle began with the 2021 funding year. So the upcoming 2025 funding year is year 5 of that budget cycle. So it's basically a use it or lose it for this upcoming year. Any unused funds at the end of the 2025 funding year, so basically come July 1, 2026, any funds left in your budget will get zeroed out. None of that will roll over. So that will get zeroed out, but July 1, 2026, you'll get a new budget allocation. And I know looking at some of the budgets for some of our libraries, even the ones, actively using, requesting Cat 2 money every year, simply can't use all the funds. All right. So if you can't use it, there's nothing that you need, then don't worry about it. All right. Because you still have to pay your non-discount portion. So it's, you don't go buy technology for the sake of buying it, because again, you still have to pay, a portion of the cost. All right. But you definitely want to use these funds if there's something that you do need. So again, 2025, final year of this 5-year cycle. Right now, service providers, vendors, that open data I mentioned, it is a public, it's all public data. Vendors are going out there and, pulling information to see how much money's left in, in our Cat 2 budgets. And then, reaching out saying, hey, you've got this money left. Some are actually even saying, hey, you've got 232,000 and, whatever, let us help you spend it. So vendors, are really, patrolling that and reaching out. All right. So again, go out, check your budget if you plan to utilize the Cat 2. Couple of places where you can see this, and I'm going to show you a couple of them. There's a Cat 2 budget tool that's out in open data. There's also, I'll show you where it's at in the portal. Right. It's also out in open data. There's a tool where, let's say, because again, this started with 2021. Let's say you asked for funding in 2021 or 2022 funding year. All right. Where the invoicing deadline has passed. So there's no chance of you going back and, getting those funds. This tool will let you know, here were funds, again, that were left on the table where you didn't get reimbursed. Okay. So do you want to put that back in your budget? The only way to put those funds back, all right, is to file a Form 500. There's an option on the form to cancel or reduce a funding request. All right, but that's the only way to do that. And, if you still have a fairly large budget and you're not going to use it all, don't worry about the funds left on the table. Don't put yourself, through filing a Form 500 if you don't need to recapture those funds. All right. But if if you've already exhausted or coming close to exhausting your fund, make sure you put all, every penny you can back into the budget. Okay, just to show you, this is what it looks like if you go to that open data site. When you initially go in, it's showing all the information for everybody in the nation. Okay, so you can go in and apply filters. Probably the hardest part with this is you have to know your billed entity number. All right, so you're going to see all of the options here for the filter. You really don't need to put in the state. Just come down under build entity and plug that number in. All right, when you do that, then it's going to show you if it's for, and I apologize, this is a school version, but it's going to show here's the school enrollment. Under the library column, it's going to show here's the total square footage, because your budget is based on square footage. So it'll say here's the square footage for this library or library system. If it's a system, it's the combined square footage, right, for all of the branches. And then under library, it'll say $4.50. All right, because that's the factor, how the budget's determined, but it's going to show, right, based on that, here is your 5-year budget. Then it's going to show, yep, this budget's been confirmed, meaning that at some point, a PIA reviewer confirmed the square footage, all right, to confirm the budget. But then it's going to say, here's the total amount from 2021 through the 2024 funding year, if anything's, everything that's been approved to date, all right, that has been funded. Now, remember, when we look at these numbers, this is a what we call a pre-discount amount. Remember that when you look at this, you're never going to receive 100% of that amount. It simply means that if your budget is at $268,000 and some change, if you were to, buy up to that amount of E-rate, eligible items under category 2, all right, then E-rate will cover up to that amount times your discount rate. All right, so if this library system is at an 80% discount rate, they would get back 80% of the $268,000. All right, like I said, you're never going to receive 100% of that amount. Now, if you did apply in 2024 for Cat 2, but you've not received a funding decision yet, it's going to show that dollar amount under pending, because what they're going to do is they're basically going to hold those funds until you get a funding decision. Then it's going to say, and now this is what you have available. All right, so they're going to account for anything, like I said, that's still pending. Now, if it says 0, that either means you didn't apply for Cat 2 for 2024, or you applied and it's already been funded. All right, and then again, this is what's available. So if you are planning on applying, and I strongly encourage you, use the Cat 2 money, all right, go out and check to make sure, what you have available. All right, let me show you where you can find this information within Epic. All right, if you don't want to have to go out to that public site. All right, so when you log into Epic, if you're an independent library under My Entities, of course, you'll just have the one site listed. If you're a library system, you want to click on the system name, which is the build entity, okay, denotes who's paying the bills. All right, so click on the library system name there at the top. Now, I didn't do a screen capture, but when you click, it's going to initially take you to the summary of that independent library or the library system. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom, there's a category 2 information section, and it will show you the cumulative total of square footage for each of your branches. So that's a good quick way to look. Okay, it says, for all my branches together, we have, 27,542 square feet. All right, look at that number, determine is that, that total correct. If it looks off to you, that's where you need to go in, all right, and look at each of your sites. Keep in mind, if you have a bookmobile, you can also put in square footage for the bookmobile, all right, because if you have 10 branches or less, the bookmobile would count as one of those branches. And you would get, even though maybe it's 200 square feet, they give you the benefit of $25,000 in your budget, all right, for those small library branches. So again, it behooves you to put in the square footage for the bookmobile, all right, and make sure that they're an entity in the portal. Okay, but to drill down and look at the actual budget, under the blue menu bar, as we read across, you'll see where it says discount rate and then Cat 2 budget. So we click there, then you have to click a second time, get Cat 2 budget information. All right, and now it's going to show you those totals. So it's going to say, here's the budget. Again, it's your square footage, that combined total times $4.50. All right, here it's going to say total in review requested cost. So again, if you've not received the funding letter, it's going to say, here's the amount that we're still working on. Total committed cost. These are the ones that, previous years you've applied for and it's been approved. And then remaining budget. If you want to look at a breakdown by funding year, you can click on view details, and then it'll show you by funding year back to 2021. All right, how much Cat 2 was approved for each year. But again, this is an easy way to go in and see what how much you've got in there. All right. Any questions at all on category 2? Everybody's quiet. Okay. I said in my session yesterday, and you've probably heard me say this before, no questions. Either I did a really good job explaining or it's stunned silence. All right. So if I've lost you, let me know that. All right, let's get into the really big change this year. I think this is going to impact our libraries, more than any change that we see this year. So the Hotspot Lending. Most of us, experienced ECF, the Emergency Connectivity Fund, during the pandemic, which allowed it paid, for hotspots for you to be able to, loan those out to patrons. Well, ECF, that did sunset. It was effective June 30th. All right, this past June. And so a lot of our libraries have those hotspots, and now patrons are accustomed to coming in, and checking those devices out. Right. So because of that need, it was during the July FCC board meeting that the FCC did approve to make hotspot lending eligible under E-rate. And to be honest, this was a big deal because E-rate, in the E-rate rules, it says that E-rate funding is for on campus, on property. All right. So, but because of the need, the FCC did extend this, all right, to off-premise. So keep in mind, though, if you already have those hotspots and you're continuing to pay for those, there's nothing you can do as far as getting funding for this current year. Because like I said, ECF ended June 30th. This new program, all right, this new eligibility, I should say, this does not kick in until July 1st, 2025. All right, so we are going to have that 1 year gap. All right, but beginning that July 1 date, then the Wi-Fi hotspots and the monthly recurring service will be eligible under E-rate. And it's going to be eligible, for schools to pass them out to students, as well as staff, and then our libraries to be able to lend them out to patrons. Now, with this, let me take a step back. With ECF, we had to determine need. You had to justify, why you were asking for a certain number of hotspots. For the libraries, that was not, as difficult as it was for the schools. The schools had to survey, families and, ask, the parent or guardian, does your child, have adequate access? It was a little bit easier for the libraries, but you still had to justify, the number of hotspots that you were requesting. So often we would look at, well, here's the number of patrons we serve, whatever. With this, we don't have to justify because there is a cap. All right, there's going to be a 3-year hotspot budget that basically the FCC has. Basically, they're using a formula, that is based on the need that we saw during ECF. All right, but there's a lot of rules around it to make you aware of, okay? Number one, you're not allowed to warehouse hotspots. So you cannot buy extra hotspots to keep on the shelf, should a hotspot, get lost, stolen, patron never brings it back, or they bring it back and it's, it's not functioning. All right, so you cannot, say, okay, I know we need 50 hotspots, based on, what we've seen as far as our demand, but I'm going to go ahead and ask for 60. So we've got 10 extra just in case. All right. If you get, if you ask for 60, you have to show that all 60 were turned on and ready to lend out. All right. So what I would suggest, if you do have those hotspot devices that maybe you received under ECF or ESSER funds, some other fund, use those devices. You can set those aside should you have a hotspot, not be returned, all right, and then use that, all right, to fill in those gaps. All right, but please let me know if you have questions on that. Okay, filtering, the FCC did give us some clarification. They actually gave us this information during ECF, but it bears repeating here. All right, because again, it's a question I'm currently getting a lot, as far as are we required to filter, for these hotspots? The FCC has said that it comes down to who owns the end user device, be it a desktop computer, a laptop, a tablet. Okay, if they're using their smartphone to surf the web, who owns the end user device? All right, as to whether you need to filter. So if the patron owns that device, then you're not required to filter the hotspot. You would only be required as a library to filter if you're also lending out the laptop or the tablet. Okay, if you're handing them a laptop, all right, and a hotspot, then you're required to filter. All right. Now, another question that I've gotten from some libraries, it's, well, what if the school is providing the laptop or that tablet, but a parent is coming to the library to get a hotspot? The school's not providing internet. All right. So the parent comes, checks out a hotspot for that student to have access. In that case, because the school district owns the laptop, the tablet, the school is responsible for the filtering, not the library, right? Because again, you didn't provide that system, right? Let me know if you have questions on that. All right, and again, we don't have to show unmet need. One-to-one initiatives, that's prohibited. It really doesn't apply to libraries. It applies to the schools. Now, a difference, significant difference from ECF, because this is now under E-rate, all the E-rate competitive bidding rules will apply. Under ECF, we didn't have to file a 470 and get bids and, justify why we chose one cell provider over another. All right, we didn't have to do that because of the emergency nature. All right, with ECF. This, you have to file a 470, all right, go out to bid. Now, the 470 has been updated, which will make this much easier, okay? So there is no bidding exemption, and we'll talk about CABIO, all right, give you a reminder what that is. But again, there are no bidding exemptions. You have to show that you filed a 470, you went through all, you jump through all of those hoops. Now, if you already have a contract, and let's say it's a 3-year contract that will cover this upcoming year, that is not grandfathered in, all right? You still have to file a 470 and enter into a new contract. Now, I do want to point out here, so they did update the 470. So you'll see here, and when we do 470 training, you're going to see this in more detail. So I'm not going to go through all of the steps of how to request this, all right? But you can see, though, that they have corrected the 470. We initially say, yep, we're looking for internet or data transmission, and then you're going to see the option, I seek bids for wireless internet services that can be delivered by a Wi-Fi hotspot for off-premise use. They make it pretty clear this is what you're asking for. All right, so that's for the service. If you also are asking for the hotspot device itself, it's going to basically mean 2 lines listed, 2 service lines listed on the 470. If you want the hotspot device, then you would also have to go down where you see the option for what we call category 1. All of this falls under cat 1. All right, this is not going to touch your cat 2 budget at all. All right, but if you want the device, you have to click on I'm seeking bids under equipment for network equipment. And then you'll see the option, I seek bids for Wi-Fi hotspots for off-premise use. All right, because again, if you want both the service and the device covered, make sure you have both listed on the 470. Now, don't confuse this. This is for off-premise, all right, to be used at the patron's home, all right, or wherever they take that hotspot, all right. Do not confuse this with if you're asking for a hotspot to be used for, say, a kiosk or a bookmobile, all right, different usage. So a little different rule here. So if you have a hotspot that you're going to dedicate for or use there for the hotspot or kiosk, that's a separate option on the 470. That one requires an RFP document. Off-premise hotspots don't require an RFP. Okay, so again, don't confuse those. Now, as far as, what do we mean by hotspot equipment? Most of us, know that little box well, right? But it is that single portable device, all right? And the FCC, this slide actually came from USAC because the FCC is making this distinction. Because during ECF, we were allowed, let's say you put a microwave, tower on a building in the middle of town to provide internet to the community. ECF paid for those services. All right. This is different. This, under E-rate, they're not going to pay for that type service. So don't plan on putting something in town, right? To spread this out to, multiple patrons at a time. Thank you. Was that Don or Christina posted that? Thank you. Yeah, and I'm also going to be sharing the one I came up with. Please use either one. All right, but we're going to talk about how it's calculated and some tools that you can use. So thank you for posting that. Okay, yeah, so if you're calculating, if it's already showing in this version the square footage, that's even better, okay, because mine does not show what you already have for square footage. And check the square footage, make sure that that's all correct. Meaning that if it's, you need to go in and update in the portal. All right. So also if you have, say, Chromebooks that have LTE on that Chromebook, we've asked the FCC, would they extend eligibility for that, to just pay for that Wi-Fi service for that device? They've not come back with an answer yet. So as it stands today, that would not be eligible. Okay. And also, each hotspot device must be associated with an E-rate line of service for that funding year. All right. So again, I mentioned that, that if you ask for, some additional hotspots, but don't turn them on, okay, not allowed. If you ask for 50 hotspots, then you have to be able to show a bill for service for 50 hotspots. Now, because so many libraries already have the hotspots because of ECF, some other fund, whatever. So you may already have those devices. You don't need to maybe right now get new devices. Service only is perfectly fine. All right. Now you may get a review question and say, well, we already own the hotspots. We didn't need those. Okay. So again, you can show service only without issue. So the caps. Right. So, and when you look at these numbers, because when I first looked at this, I'm like, whoa, okay. I fully expect service providers to tweak their pricing. All right. But keep in mind that the service cap during ECF, the cap was $40 per month. Under E-rate, it's $15 per month, 15. Okay. $15 per month for the recurring service, and up to $90 for the hotspot device. Now, looking in my crystal ball, right? My guess is we're going to see cell providers dropping the monthly rate, but charging us for those hotspot devices. During ECF, where again, most of the rates ran, and I saw typically $37.99 up to $39.99 per month. But the hotspot devices were either free or minimal cost, 99 cents, some minimal cost. So I'm almost betting, like I said, looking in my crystal ball, that service providers will lower the monthly rate, but they're no longer going to give away the hotspots. All right, because again, E-rate will fund up to $90 times your discount rate, all right, for those hotspot devices. Now, a couple of things here though. If you get the new hotspot devices and there's some activation or configuration cost, that's part of that funding cap. All right, so that gets factored in. But if there are any taxes, that is not included in the cap. So you could ask for, $15 for the monthly, recurring fee. And let's say, for that $15 per month, maybe it's $1.50 for taxes. Because often, even if you're tax exempt, we'll still see some tax. The universal service fee may be on there, right? So just be prepared. Look at some cell providers. I know during ECF, they showed, here's the estimated monthly tax cost. When you go to file, when we do the 471 training, you're going to see this in detail. All right. But you need to be prepared to do 2 line items in the funding request. All right. One for the monthly recurring, and then a second line item for the taxes. You want to make sure, that all of this gets, E-rated. Okay. Now, of course, because again, this is a question I've gotten. Well, what if we go with the plan that costs $25 a month? You're allowed to do that, of course. All right. Just know that anything over that $15, plus the taxes, will be out of pocket. All right. So just be prepared for that. Anything more than that $15, that per month, service cap, you'll simply be paying out of pocket. So I mentioned that this is a 3-year budget cap. All right. So, and that's the pre-discount. So this is working, similar to what we get with category 2. So once you run the numbers, and if it comes out to, $75,000 over the 3 years, and your discount rate is 70%, that means you're going to be getting 70% of that 75,000, whatever that budget number is. All right. They're not going to cover 100% of that budget amount. All right. But again, like I said, this is going to be a 3-year budget. Now, a point here that when I first read the order, I was like, well, this is a little confusing. Oh, a lot of this was confusing, quite honest. And some of this we're still getting, updates, clarifications. All right. But with the 3-year budget, when you look at, if you look at the tool that Christine has provided, when you look at that, just know that when you look at that 3-year amount, in any 1 year, okay, during that 3-year cycle, you can ask for up to 45% of that budget. The reason we're allowed to do that, let's say you didn't participate in ECF. You're not doing, hotspots for patrons yet. Or you need to expand what you're currently doing. That means that, you would be buying additional hotspot devices. Let's say you're doing this in year 1. So you're going to have, the hotspot device cost as well as a monthly recurring. So you could have a bigger, cost in a single year. And the FCC has said that's fine as long as it does not exceed 45% of that budget. So that way there's no one single year that the E-rate fund is, having a more than expected hit, all right, on the fund. Okay. Now, there is no set limit to the quantity of plans. Again, the first time I read this order, I misunderstood that. All right. So I'm going to make some clarifications here. All right. But again, there's no set limit on the quantity of plans as long as it's not more than 45% of the 3-year budget. Okay. And again, I'll explain what that means here in a minute. All right. If you use less than 45%, it doesn't mean that you're going to get more in the future years. So let's say in year 1, you use 40%, all right, of that 3-year budget. That means then you have 60% of that remaining to be able to use over the next 2 years. All right. Just because you use, up to that 45%, it's not going to give you more money in the remaining years. Now, here's the tool that I have out on my site, right? But just to explain to you what you're looking at here. So the way the budget is calculated, all right, is how in the heck did they come up with this number? For libraries, it's based on square footage. So we take our square footage, we multiply that by your category 1 discount rate, and then by 0.0055. So basically, the way this works, for every 1,000 square feet that you have, you get 5.5. How they came up, well, actually, I know how they came up with the formula. I know the gentleman who suggested this. but the FCC liked it, okay? But 5.5 hotspots per 1,000 square feet. Again, this is why it's so important you update your square footage in the portal. All right. Then we multiply that by $630, another head scratcher here. $630, if you look at, the caps, you're allowed, this is 36 months. So it's $15 times 36 months, which is $540. And then you can get up to $90 for a hotspot device for that service line. That's $630. So we do the math. So let's say, look down here at my chart just so you can see how this plays out. So let's say, look at the first one here, where it's a library system where they have just shy of 19,000 square feet. All right. So we multiply that by that 5.5, okay, per 1,000 square feet, and then apply the discount rate. That comes out to 73 hotspot, $630, okay? Hotspot device and the 36-month service fee, so 73. But the order says, then you can round that up to the nearest 10. So if you do the math and it says 73, we round it up to 80. And the spreadsheet, I have this tool out on my website. It's already set to do all this calculation. All right. So if you want to, kind of look at the, different square footage numbers, what's that, do to your cap here. All right. So we round that up to 80. We multiply that by the 630. So in this case, that comes out to a 3-year budget of $50,400. Now, like I said, when I first read this, it's like, okay, that means I can have up to 80 hotspots. Well, not necessarily. All right. If I want to buy, 80 hotspots, doing the $15 a month, and I'm getting charged $90, for each hotspot device, then I can, my cap is 80. But if I already own the hotspot devices, I just want service. Well, over 3 years, that's $540. That means I can get more lines, right? More than the 80. And then the last column here simply shows you, here's that 45%, just to, put it in your face, okay? That this is the max that, pre-discount amount. If your budget is $50,400, here's the max, any one funding year that you could request, all right, as a pre-discount. All right. So if you do go out and use my tool, it looks like Don or Christine's might be the better one to use if it already has your square footage in it. But if you do go out and look at mine, just go out, you'll just plug in your numbers, the square footage and the discount rate, and it'll calculate. Now, the reason they're calculating it this way is to make it more equitable. So if you have, let's say you have 2 library systems, different cities, but the square footage is about the same. Maybe one is in a really low income area. Another, maybe it's a more, more affluent area. One's at a 90% discount rate, the other's at a 40%. Then obviously the 90%er is the one that has greater need. They're going to get a higher budget. All right. So the FCC has said, this is how we're making it equitable. Okay, let's talk about some of the rules here. And a lot of this, it's based on lessons learned during ECF. So some of this makes perfect sense. Okay, they also made some changes from what we saw with ECF, again, part of the lessons learned. So we are required to have an AUP, all right? Well, we did that during ECF, all right? Something that, patrons understand that when they're checking out this hotspot, it's because they lack need. So you need to have that language in your AUP just saying, yep, you're checking this out because you lack adequate access. All right. But because of all the issues we had with ECF, they've made this change where they're saying libraries are not required to collect signed documentation of your user compliance with their AUP like they did with the ECF program. All right. So, I mean, most libraries, whatever media you're checking, patrons checking out, there's some, policy that says, if you don't return this item, this is what's going to happen. All right. So you just have that language in that policy. All right. So you do have to clearly state that the library's Hotspot Lending program is being provided only to library patrons who need broadband access while off premise. Now, the second one here, The off-premise use must be primarily for the integral, immediate, and proximate to the provision of library services to library patrons. All right, previously it said for educational purposes. Well, you don't know what the library patron, and you're not going to dictate what the library patron's going to use that hotspot for. All right, so they did tweak that language there, right? Now, again, this last bullet impacts, I think, the schools more. Some schools, if say a student logging into the district's site to be able to use, say, some curriculum software, back on the school's network, that basically they had to implement the same requirements, right? I can't come up with a situation where this would impact libraries the same way. All right, because again, you're not required to filter if you're not providing the end user device as well. This was the other big piece that we saw during ECF. All right. And again, I keep repeating, it caused lots of heartburn. Okay. So in the order, it does say that rules contain strict non-usage vendor notification and disconnect requirements. So these requirements really are on the vendor, all right, on the provider. So vendors are required to provide data usage reports, and I'm reading some of this because this is new, in a machine readable digital format so that the information lines can be read and sorted, okay? So that you can clearly identify what lines are not being used, right? So you as a library, you need to regularly review those reports, monitor, okay, this patron, checked out this hotspot. They've had it for the past, this past month, and they're not using it. So just keep an eye on that. So here are the specifics, what the service providers have to do. At least once every 31 days, they're required to identify the lines not being used, all right? And basically you have gone unused for no less than 60 days. So again, service providers just need to monitor that, all right? Upon determining that it hasn't been used for 60 days, all right, then the service provider needs to reach out to you to say, hey, you need to do something. It's been 60 days and that hotspot's not been used, all right? So whether you reach out, if you can contact the patron, whatever you can do, all right, why is that not being used? After 90 days, all right, if that still has not changed, there's still no usage, the service provider is required to turn that hotspot off. They'll notify you, but they're required they have to turn it off, and they're not allowed to charge you, all right? So again, that's a huge change from ECF. We ran into lots of issues, filing for reimbursement, reviewers coming back saying, well, there are lines on here, where, there's no usage. So we're not going to reimburse you. Well, we're getting billed for that, whether they use it or not. We can't make the patron use it. All right. So again, this is how they're correcting that, but it's on the provider, all right, to do that work. And they're not allowed to charge you after that 90 days. Now, another piece here, as far as record keeping, just like with ECF, we had the same rule there. You want to make sure that you inventory, the hotspot devices, keep track, what was the make and model, serial number, your asset, inventory tag. All right. The full name of the person to whom the equipment was provided. You'll notice the note there, not required for libraries. All right. So again, that lesson learned with ECF. The dates the equipment was loaned out and returned. Okay, or the date that the library was notified that the equipment was missed, lost, damaged. All right, so as soon as you realize that, okay, that hotspot device is out of commission, document that, here's the asset tag number, it's out of commission. Now I know with ECF, and I'm sure it'll work the same way under E-rate, that if a library, contacted their cell provider, often the cell providers within a few days would give you a replacement device. All right. And we've explained this to USAC, that from month to month, the line numbers on those bills are not going to match, because as hotspots are replaced, all right, those line numbers could change. During ECF, that was not an issue. They never, bothered to look at the line numbers. If you were approved for 50, then you got reimbursed for the 50, All right. So again, it should work the same way. A few more details here. Like I said, a lot of rules around this. But again, most of these we've already experienced these with ECF. None of these were, I guess, real big surprises. The FCC has said that they're not going to dictate the length of lending periods. It's up to you. You know, you hand this out to a patron, they can have it for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, you know, a longer period of time. They're not, you know, dictating that. They're leaving it up to the applicant. Just be aware, priority of funding. So right now, the E-rate fund on an annual basis can fund up to $3.9 billion. All right. So each year we never come close to that. But if doing the hotspot lending, if that pushes us over that $3.9 billion, then what USAC has said, or the FCC has said that they're going to do is they're going to give priority. They're going to fund all other Category 1 requests, so our bandwidth or internet, right? All other Category 1 requests, can't say that, request, all right? And then all the Category 2 request. Then see how much, you know, how much we have left in the fund. Then they're going to start at the highest discount rate, all right, for both schools and libraries. They'll start at 90%, start working backwards to fund the off-premise hotspot cost, all right, until they run out of funds. If some of you have been around like me for a long time doing E-rates, and you might remember the old Priority 2 program, which Category 2 replaced with the old Priority 2, you know, they waited, you know, what's the Cat 1 demand? How much money do we have left to fund, you know, any of the equipment request? All right, it'll be similar to that. Right, but like I said, you know, we don't come anywhere near that 3.9 billion, so not anticipating that happening. Okay, let's see, make sure that we cover everything else here. Okay, so you know, some of the restrictions here, like I said, just make sure that you know, we've covered all of that. I think we do have that. The 3-year life cycle. So, you know, if you do apply for Cat 2 funding for equipment for internal connections, with Category 2 equipment, we're required to keep that equipment for 5 years. You know, after the 5 years, you can dispose of it, you can sell it, whatever. The FCC has said, okay, we understand these hotspot devices, you know, their longevity is nowhere near that. So it's a 3-year life cycle. So you are required to keep the hotspots for 3 years. After the 3 years, you can dispose of it. You know, if again, like I mentioned, if something gets broken, stolen, you know, document that in your inventory. All right, but again, you have to show you kept it for the 3 years. Okay, so if the vendor disconnects because of the 90-day non-usage, you are allowed to go back and basically turn those devices back on. You know, have that service line, you know, maybe, you know, pass it out, lend it out to another patron, all right, but it's only the one time. Again, I don't see this affecting the libraries like I would the schools, because the schools, when they, you know, put a hotspot device in a student's hand, the hotspot basically would stay with that student throughout the school year, you know, whereas with patron lending, you know, you've got that turnover. All right. So again, I don't think that's going to affect our libraries quite as much. All right. So again, not allowed to bill, you know, if they turn it back on a second time, okay, not allowed to bill for that. Now, if you are going to apply for the off-premise hotspots, and you're applying for other, you know, Category 1 services, you know, say, you know, your circuits down to your branches, make sure you file 2 separate 471s. Don't put this on the same 471 as, you know, your other Cat 1 request. We expect this to get a lot more, you know, scrutiny, a lot more review questions. You don't want this holding up your other Cat 1 request. So just plan on putting these on a separate 471 application. Okay, that's pretty much all I know about the hotspot, off-premise today. We're monitoring the FAQs, questions that are, going out. We have several questions that the state coordinator, the SECA group, that we've sent to USAC and to the FCC that we're waiting on clarification. So, as we get that, we'll be sharing that information. All right. But like I said, that's basically what we know today. All right, Don, jump in.
I just want to add one more thing. We don't have all the details to share today, but it's Oakland's intention to issue a 470 for the state. Any library can issue your own 470 for your hotspot programs, but our intention is to put one out on behalf of all libraries on the state to collect the bids. We're not going to be able to accept the bids, fund a hotspot program, anything like that with libraries, but we will collect the bids and make them available to you. So if you look at the bids that we've received and they meet your needs, you should be able to file your 471 in the winter based on the bids that we received referencing that 470. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me. And we'll make sure when we do the 471 training that we will show you, because if you're referencing Oakland's 470 instead of your own, it does change the way when you upload your contract. It changes the way you file a little bit. It's not hard, all right, but it will change the way you answer the questions in the contract module, all right. But we'll be sure to cover that when we do the 471 training. All right, thank you, Don. Okay, so another change we'll see this upcoming year, some changes to the 470. Well, I'm going to jump down to the last bullet. They've already changed the 470, or we've already talked about the change to the 470 for the hotspots. All right, so that's been corrected there. All right, a couple of other welcome changes. Some of us feel this impact more than others. Okay, one of the things with the 470. The 470 acts as a request for proposal on its own. But if you wanted to upload, an additional document, to better explain what you're looking for, this is something I regularly do. If I'm asking for circuits down to, the endpoint circuits down to the branches, often I'll upload just a spreadsheet to say, we're looking for, point-to-point circuits, from our main library down to this branch at this address. So that way vendors understand, exactly what you're looking for, or, we want a circuit that's going to go back, say to Oakland. All right. So again, we could upload that document, given some clarifications. If you were asking for Cat 2 equipment, it's often easier just to upload a spreadsheet that says, okay, here's our preferred make and model, or equivalent of, the switches, the access points. Just made it easier. Well, there was, I don't know if you'd call it a glitch, but with the 470, if you did not upload a document at the time you were initially filing the 470, you could not go back and add a document later. Right? So they have corrected that with this new version of the 470. So you do have the ability now, after you hit submit, if you're getting questions from vendors, or you realize, you need to change a quantity or, something like that, you can go back to that already posted 470 and upload this additional document. Now, heads up with that though. If it changes your service, and it typically does, all right, very few changes that you would make would not impact the services. All right. So when you go in, if you upload another document or or a document, the system now is going to ask you, does this change your service? And then, like I said, you're more than likely going to answer yes. All right. Then it's going to automatically recalculate and change your 28-day waiting period. All right, because anytime you change a service, it restarts that minimum 28-day waiting time frame. All right, so just keep that in mind. If you go in and you upload a document And maybe we can't afford to wait 28 days because that will push you beyond the 471 deadline. All right, you want to be careful there. And you're going to hear this again if you attend 470 training, because I'm going to be showing you where this is located, what this looks like. All right, but again, that is a big change. The other change, and again, welcomed, is the ability to cancel a posted 470. So let's say we file a 470 and we realize we're still under contract. I still have another year. I don't have to entertain bids from a vendor. You could leave the 470 out there, but then you have to deal with vendors reaching out, asking you questions, sending you quotes and all that you're just then going to ignore, right? So we now have the ability to go in and cancel a posted 470, providing you've not uploaded a contract and pointed to that 470, all right? Because if you've done that, well, now that 470 has been captured, basically, all right? So if you can only cancel it, providing you've not, associated it with a contract in the module or referenced it on a 471. Right, so that should make things, a little easier if you have to refile. All right, again, let me know if you have questions on any of that. Okay, this one's a fun topic to explain. If you are applying for Category 2, we call this mixed functionality. This is something we have had issues with for a number of years, and each year it seems to get a little more problematic. If you are applying, we see this most often with renewal license, all right, say for access points. When you're buying brand new access points, if your APs require a license, which we see with, Cisco, Meraki, I think Aruba, they require the license. When you go to renew those licenses, typically these are multi-year subscriptions. When you go to renew, those renewal, what we call right to use license, also includes some level of maintenance. When we file for Category 2, there are 3 different subcategories, all right? There is the subcategory called internal connections, and then the subcategory for basic maintenance of internal connections. If a service includes this mixed functionality, where it includes both, USAC says we have to request that under basic maintenance. The reason this is an issue is there are all kind of rules when it falls under maintenance as to how you get reimbursed. So let me explain this a little further. When you're buying the new APs and you get just the right to use license, it's in essence the operating system. Without it, AP won't function. All right. So when it's just right to use, that falls under internal connections. Let's say you're paying for a 3-year or a 5-year subscription. You could go ahead and pay for, let's say, 5-year. You could go ahead and pay all 5 years up front. You get your funding letter, you go through all those steps, you could go ahead and file for reimbursement. So you get reimbursed for all 5 years at one time. Nice and easy, okay? If it's classified as having maintenance involved, whole different set of rules. Even though you've paid for all 5 years up front, if it's under basic maintenance, it's treated like a 5-year, like a multi-year contract. So that means that every year you would file a 471 and say, okay, I'm applying for 1/5 of that cost. And then you get reimbursed at the end of the year. All right. Even though you paid for this, maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago, right, you still have to wait that 5-year period to get all of the funds. So this has been a mess, to be, quite honest. All right. So if you are applying for those renewal license, and again, this is a slide from USAC, right? What USAC is recommending is, check with the manufacturer, ask if they can split out the cost. This has not been tested yet. All right. So I don't know if it's going to work. All right. How successful we'll be, but we're definitely going to give it a shot. All right. But we split the cost. And the reason you want to do that is you want to get as much of those funds back as soon as possible. So if they come back and say, okay, this 5-year subscription is $10,000 and $2,000 is earmarked for maintenance, that means you can go ahead and get the reimbursement year 1 for the $8,000. All right, the part designated for the right to use alone. Now, USAC has said, and like I said, not tested this, that if you call the help desk, that 888-203-8100 number, that they would be able to tell you what the split is. So that tells me the manufacturers are reporting this to USAC. I know the manufacturers report to USAC if there's, let's say they have a router that has ineligible usage, or an advanced firewall, all right, with ineligible, functionality. Manufacturers report that to USAC. So that's great. That's wonderful if they're also, reporting this split. All right, that would be very helpful. All right, now this tip here at the bottom, oftentimes, when we go to file for renewal license, we have no idea at that point, what's going to be quoted to us, to know up front that, yeah, it's going to include both. So when you file a 470, if you attend 470 training, you're going to hear this again. All right. When you file the 470, ask for the renewal license under both subcategories, under both internal connections and basic maintenance. That way you're covered when you go to file the 471. All right. Again, this is a tip I've been sharing for the last several years because of the issues that we're seeing. All right. If you're putting this out to bid, you're filing the 470. All right. I would put in the narrative of the 470, that for renewal license, the portion, if there's any maintenance included in this, renewal, that the cost has to be separated out. I would go ahead and put that in the narrative of the 470, put it out there up front, letting the vendors know they need to split that cost. All right. If you're talking to a vendor, ask the question, does this include both right to use, right, and maintenance? So basic maintenance is defined as, it really is basic, that software, upgrades, where you do the upgrades, the patch fix, the firmware updates, they'll have like a help desk, phone number to call in if you have a question. All right. So just ask, for the SKU, does it include, both of these functions? All right. So again, if they say yes, work with them to get that split. Okay, I do want to remind you of this. This is not new. We've had this for the last several years, but it's a reminder. All right. Remember, if you are using the type service we refer to as CABIO, commercially available bundled internet option. We see a lot of our smaller library branches using this. So again, just a reminder, because it's this time of year, we're looking at, what services we're using. Do I need to file a 470? All right, keep in mind, if you are using this CABIO option, this would be like a DSL, a cable modem type service, right? The FCC has already said this is cost effective, so you don't have to file the 470. You still file the 471 to say, okay, we want this cost covered, but you don't have to go out to bid for this. All right, this is one of two bidding exemptions we're going to talk about. All right, so just remember, you don't have to go out to bid, providing, all right, the minimum speed for the service has to be 100 meg download by 10 meg upload. That's the minimum. All right. And I know a lot of our services now are much, higher than that. But again, the 100 by 10 is the minimum speed. And then the annual cost, and excuse me, the annual cost is per library site, not, if you've got multiple branches, the combined cost. This is per branch. All right. Where the annual cost does not exceed $3,600. So no more than $300 a month. Now, keep in mind, it cannot be, you can't say, well, this library over here, their cost is $2,400 for the year, so I can do $4,800 for this other branch. That's not the case. It's $3,600 per location. Okay. No one location can exceed that. And that also includes that $3,600 if there's any install cost or, equipment rental, things like that. All right. So again, just a reminder that this is an option, but you don't have to go out to bid. You still put it on 471. And by the way, that's a slide that I added. So if you're looking along in a PDF, that slide's not in your slide deck. All right. I will send Christine the updated copy. Okay. So let's talk about some other changes. These came about last year, but it's still new. So it's like, okay, bears repeating. Again, some of these we see more with, more impact on the school side, but just to make you aware, right? The first one here is called 10% internet access hold harmless. All right. So if there's any ineligible use of your internet, all right, you don't have to cost allocate. I just, like I said, make you aware. I see this more of an impact for the schools. All right. So again, if you are, let's say having a group come in using your internet, you don't have to cost allocate for that. Here's the biggie though for libraries. And again, this is library only. The schools don't get this bidding exception. But for our libraries, if you are going to apply for Category 2 funding and the amount is less than $3,600, maybe you just need a few APs. All right. But the pre-discount amount is $3,600 or less. You don't have to file the Form 470 and go out to bid for that. All right. So again, that's total cost per library, just like we see with the CABIO. That was another reason I put that CABIO slide in there, because these two exemptions are so similar. All right. So again, total cost is per library. So maybe you need three APs for this branch, 4 over here. Again, as long as it's $3,600 or less. All right. So cost effective rules still apply. All right. Meaning that, a vendor can't say, this AP is normally $500. I'm going to charge them $1,000, right? Because they don't have to go out to bid. All right. Still has to be cost effective. And you still have to sign contracts. All right. So if you get a quote for this Category 2 equipment, we call the hardware quote. All right. Let's say, it's just a simple hardware quote. You still sign and date that. We still refer to that as a contract because you upload that document in the contract module. It's not a formal contract. You're not locked into terms or whatever, but it's still referred to as a contract. You still sign and date it. All right. Prior to filing the 471. All right. So again, this could, ease a lot of burdens on our libraries if you want to use the Cat 2, and not have to go through that bidding process. Let me know if you have questions there. All right. This other, again, I see this a lot with the schools, with some libraries. All right. Keep in mind, I've talked about the non-instructional facilities. You've heard this over the years. Non-instructional facilities do not qualify for Category 2 funding. Well, let's say you have a separate admin building. Okay, admin facility. It's not open to patrons, but that's where your NOC is. All right, that's where all your your core router is there. Your switches, whatever. We are allowed to install that Category 2 funded equipment in that non-instructional facility, providing that we can show that traffic, from our branches are going through that site. So there is no cost allocation. The admin staff within that building, can still, benefit from the use of that equipment. All right. Without, you don't have to cost allocate. Keep in mind, though, if you've got that non-instructional facility and you're buying equipment that will be solely used, like an access point for that building, that would not be eligible. All right. Because then it's only being used by that admin building. All right. But again, if it's that shared equipment, you can show the branches traffic going through there, we're okay. This last one, again, it's a big deal. Okay. Full eligibility of data network cabling. So under Category 2, under internal connections, if you need to put in, say, some new Ethernet drops, through your buildings, through your libraries, all right, E-rate will cover that, the material cost as well as the installation. All right. But it's always been only if it's for eligible use, meaning connecting to eligible equipment, such as an access point, a switch. All right. Now, all right, we've gotten this clarification. Let's say, you also want to put in a security camera, smoke detector. All right. Some piece of, a VoIP handset. All right. That you can do that without penalty, as long as that Ethernet circuit, that Ethernet line is still being used for what it was originally intended, that original eligible use. So what I mean by that is, let's say you run an Ethernet drop that you're going to connect to an access point, but you also need to plug in that security camera. You could put, say, a small switch, a small multi-port switch on that Ethernet drop, plug in both the AP and the camera. So that's still going to allow that access point to, to work. All right. That is fine. Just keep in mind though, if you run an Ethernet drop solely to plug in that VoIP handset or that security camera, E-rate's not going to cover that cost. All right. So again, just splitting hairs here. All right. Just understand, as long as still original use can take place, you're okay. Okay, just some reminders here on the application process. Like I said, I'm not going to go through and explain, now this is what a 470 is, and here's the purpose. All right, the assumption is you're already familiar with that. All right, this is just some reminders. Again, since we're doing this, once a year, just reminders, the time frames, when you need to file the certain forms. So this time of year, into December, even into January. All right, this is when we start assessing our needs, creating our plans. Go back and look at your current contracts for your bandwidth, your internet access. All right. If you're applying for or have been applying for MIBS, the Managed Internal Broadband Service, where you contract with a third party to manage, monitor your network, when does that contract expire? If it's going to expire this coming June 30th, then you need to plan on filing the 470. For your bandwidth, does the contract allow for voluntary extensions? All right. Most of the ones I see for our libraries don't. All right. But there are a few that do. Right. The admin window, like I said, this is this period of time. Go in, verify the square footage, update that, especially if you're doing Cat 2 or the off-premise hotspots. If you do have to file a 470, all right. Remember, you need to factor in enough time to wait the minimum 28 days, do the bid evaluation, getting contracts signed, especially if, what you're asking for requires board approval. Maybe you're asking for, a lot of internal connections, and there's some threshold. Any dollar amount requires board approval, right? Or a certain dollar amount requires that approval. Make sure you kind of backwards engineer this. How long will that process take? Right. Again, 471, we don't have the date yet. Again, expecting it to be mid-January to mid-latter March timeframe. All right. Now, again, if you've been filing for a while, we talked about there's that overlap, dealing with 3 years at any given time. All right. Again, go back, check those deadlines, make sure everything's covered. Just another reminder here, Category 1 service, because it's recurring, always falls between July 1 and June 30th. All right. But if you are asking for a Category 2 equipment, what we call non-recurring, you have 18 months to get that equipment purchased and installed. All right. So, this works well if you're looking at a construction project. Go back and look at the, the timeline for that construction project. Anything under Cat 2 that you might need, will you need it during this 18-month period? And if the answer is yes, then you need to be prepared to get the 470 filed, all right, to be able to get the quotes. So we do get the benefit 90 days before the start of the funding year. You can receive the equipment as early as April 1st. Okay. And then on the back end, we get another 90 days on the back end. So you have until September 30th, all right, on the back end of the funding year to get that completed. All right. So upcoming funding year, that gives you from April 1, 2025 to September 30th, 2026. All right. So again, do that planning there. And let me know if you have questions on that.
I just want to interject with a quick little advertisement regarding branch circuits. Again, libraries can put out their 470 for their branch services, but Oakland has created a new thing that we're doing for libraries that we will provide you a branch service, do the E-rate ourselves, which we keep, and just charge you once a year for providing that service. So email me if you need more information about that. Thanks.
Thanks, Dawn. Yeah, because if filing these E-rate forms give you heartburn, that's a very good option, all right, for those branch circuits. All right, just a few more reminders when, going back and determining, do I need to file that 470? If you're going to do that branch option, then that's off the plate. You don't have to do that. If you are doing the CABIO, you don't have to file the 470. All right, so off the hook there. new contracts, okay, again, something needs to be renewed. If you have a current contract and maybe you're in the middle of that contract and you need a bandwidth upgrade, go check with the service provider. Are you allowed to upgrade? Does the contract state you're allowed to do that? Some providers won't put that in their contract and won't let you out of the contract. So have the conversation with the service provider. All right, I don't want to name any names here, okay? But check with the service provider. All right, see if that upgrade is available within the current terms of your existing contract. All right, if not, and the vendor will allow you to get out of the contract, you would file a new 470 to do that upgrade. Contract extensions, again, look to see, does the existing contract allow for that? If it does, some contracts will say it's good for 3 years and then will allow you to do 2 one-year extensions. So, if you're happy with the service, you can put something in writing, check with the provider. Each provider, handles this a little differently. Some may be good with a simple email saying, hey, we want to use that extension. Some would require something on letterhead and signed. Some providers will send you an addendum. All right, varies by the service provider. So check on that. Just know that during PIA review, if you filed for 2024 and you said, okay, my expiration is June 30th of 2025, and then you file, next year's the 2025 471 saying, well, now my expiration is June 30th, 2026. The reviewer is going to come back and say, okay, show us where you were allowed to, to extend and where you notified the vendor. So just be prepared to provide that information. How are we doing here on time? Okay, again, we don't know the deadline yet. As I mentioned with the 470, we won't know that till we know the 471. So the way it works, okay, just a reminder here, if the FCC says March 25, all right, March 25th is the deadline for the 471. We count back 29 days, all right? So then that would allow you to wait your 28 days, and then on the 29th day, evaluate the bids, choose your vendor, get things signed, upload it in the portal, all of that. And of course, if at all possible, don't wait that long. I like to say, been there, done that. It's never a fun day because you're trying to do all of that in one day. All right. And as I've said this before, it's not a good day to be you. Okay. It's a little stressful, but it can be done. All right. And if you are planning on, if you know you need to file a 470, please plan on attending the 470 training. All right. Because again, especially with the changes on the forms, make sure you understand how to do that. And we are splitting the training. So we are doing basically category 1 training version of the 470, and then a category 2. All right, so we are going to split that training. Also out on my website under the resource library, there's a number of guides out there. There are some bid evaluation templates that you can use. All right, number of documents out there that will help with the 470 process. Now, I do want to share this with you. This was something that that USAC provided. Every year, well, the last several years, we've gone back and forth with how do you calculate, all right? We have always, the day you file the 470, regardless of the time, whether it's 9 a.m., 9 p.m., that counted as day 1. I know last year with training, lots of discussion, is that day 1 or is that day 0? So USAC did come back this year with clarification. The day you file it, that is day 1. Bottom line, when you submit the 470, the darn form will tell you, here's the allowable contract date. Make note of that date. All right, so that way you know for sure, because the date on that form, that's the date you can start evaluating bids. All right, so just a heads up there. All right, if you're not going to attend the 470 training and you're going to go jump out there and get a form filed, make note of that date. Okay, the last thing we're going to talk about, and spend just a few minutes because I know lots of word has gone out about this, the Cybersecurity Pilot program, just to make you aware. All right, so this actually was approved back in early June. This is going to be, the FCC approved this as a 3-year pilot. right now, E-rate does not cover cybersecurity. And I know that's something that we've all been, screaming and yelling about. This is where we need help, right? So the FCC says, yeah, but we have no idea what the impact would be on the E-rate fund. So we can't just go out and say, yep, let's make this eligible. So the whole point of this, it's going to be a 3-year pilot so they can get some idea of the cost. In essence, that's what they did with ECF. We had ECF, for about 3 years. So they had a lot of data to be able to look at that and say, okay, we think we know what the cost is. And I'm sorry, there's a vehicle driving by, so you see some reflection in the background there, distracting me. Sorry about that. All right. So this pilot is basically going to do the same thing. 3 years, what's the cost going to be? Do we make this eligible under E-rate? So one of the things I want to stress here is, because I keep, again, getting questions, will and when, we be able to get this covered under E-rate? It's going to be 3 years, right? Because they're going to run this pilot for 3 years, evaluate the data. So as it stands right now, unless the FCC totally surprises us, it's going to be at least 3 years before they decide whether to make this eligible under E-rate or not. This pilot is going to be very competitive. The amount, like I said, they're just doing a sampling. It's $200 million to cover 3 years worth of cost. Another reason I'm stressing this is a lot of vendors have been sending out emails implying this is a done deal, get E-rate to cover your cybersecurity. All right, this is not a done deal. Like I said, this is competitive, and the funding is limited to $200 million for the 3 years. I do not mean to discourage you from applying. All right, it's like playing the lottery. The only guarantee I can give you, some of you have heard me say this already, if you don't buy a ticket, you're not going to win, right? The other, line of thought here is, but if a lot of people go ahead and apply, that will give the FCC a heads up on the cost. And I can't dispute that, all right? So yeah, that makes sense. Just know that if you're going to apply for this, it is very competitive. So, don't go out and budget and think, oh yeah, E-rate's going to cover this. All right. Again, just giving you the heads up there. Okay. Now, it will cover, there's 4 different categories of eligible equipment or services. I'm not going to go into this. Currently under Cat 2, E-rate does cover what's classified as a basic firewall. So you can get a firewall appliance covered under E-rate now, but it's only, the basic level. If it's been, identified as an advanced appliance, E-rate's not going to basically cover any of those advanced features. All right. But again, like I said, there's 4 different categories. And I did include the link here if you want to go out and look at that full eligible service list, to see exactly what's there. So if you are looking at applying for this, it's basically one and done. All right. There's only going to be one application cycle. And the deadline to do this initial application is November 1st. So that's coming up here, pretty quick. All right. So don't think that, well, I'm going to think about it and maybe, try next year. There will not be an application, opportunity next year. So 1 year only. All right. But again, it would cover, say, 3 years worth of cost, say if you're doing like an MFA, subscription. So the way this will work is, to be considered, we fill out what's called there's a form for everything, a form 484, part 1. So it's going to ask you questions like, what are your goals? What are your cybersecurity goals? What are the objectives? It does ask for an estimated cost. So you do need to reach out to vendors and ask them to give you an estimate. All right. Now, if you are chosen as a participant, that estimate goes out the window. You cannot use that. There will be a cybersecurity pilot version of the Form 470. You would then have to go out to bid if you're selected. Now, again, out at my site, very top of the page, give me a chance to get there, all documents pertaining to this pilot. All right. So I do have a copy of a webinar that the FCC did put on back in September, answering some of the questions. USAC came up with a Form 484 Part 1 guide. It is probably the best document that they've ever done. I mean, it is really well done. I actually put out, it's a Word document. It has most of the questions. The guide, while it is really good, there have been a few questions that were added. None of them, extreme. Most of them are like the, select all that apply. So not all of the questions are in the guide. But I was about to say, I did put out a Word document. It's about 5 pages long, pulling out the questions that are currently in the guide. So you can use that as a working document, to start typing up like your goals and the objectives, if you're meeting with a committee. All right. So you can go ahead and answer those questions. So you have all of that, written down when you sit down, in the portal to file this. All right, so again, documents out there, feel free to use those. So again, if you are selected as a participant, like I said, you'll follow that up with a Form 470. There'll be a version of the 471. And within that 471, there's going to be some additional 484 Part 2 questions. All right, and then they'll issue funding letters following pretty much the E-rate process. All right, but again, just making you aware, there are caps to this. So again, nationwide, no single, let's say, really large, metropolitan library system or school district, won't be allowed to, basically eat up all the funds. There will be caps here. But again, remember that 200 million is, to cover all 3 years worth of the cost. So let's jump down here for libraries. All right, again, it is based on if it's a smaller library, it's a pre-discount amount, $15,000 annually, so $45,000, for the 3-year period. And then the max will be, if a library site has more than 11 branches, then they're capped at $175,000. On an annual basis. So multiply that by 3 to get your full budget. With schools, it is going to be based on the number of students. So large school districts, think, LA County School District, Chicago City School District, New York City School District. All right. They will be capped at no more than $1.5 million per year. So $4.5 million. All right. But again, just to give you some ideas there. The other piece here is if you are planning on applying for this, the first thing, in addition to, coming up with goals and objectives and all that information, is having access to the form, all right, to the 484 Part 1. So to do that, whoever is listed as assigned as the account administrator in Epic, they're the only individual who can, go out and extend rights. So the AA would need to log into Epic. In the upper right-hand corner of the landing page, you see the option to manage users. All right, then you click on manage user permission. Then you can click on, for some reason, USAC listed it as CBR instead of CPP for Cybersecurity Pilot Program, but it will be listed as CBR. All right, and then you can go to your users and extend full rights. You need to give full rights to be able to submit this form. All right. But again, that will allow, you as a user or whoever you're going to assign as the user with full rights. When they're in the portal, it's similar to, getting into the bear. You'll go up and you'll click on the tiles. When you click there, in addition to Epic Invoice, if you have, rights for that form, you'll also see Cybersecurity Pilot Program. All right. So when you click there, then you'll see your build entity, the name of your library system, and then off to the right, file form 484 Part 1. All right. So like I said, hardest part of this right now is knowing how to even get to the form itself. All right. I think that's all the updates, all the getting caught up for veterans that I have. All right. Please let me know if you do have questions, because I know I threw a lot at you kind of fast.
So while Lori's taking a sip of coffee,
Sorry, still drinking coffee.
taking a half
As
a
my sign
breath.
back here says, I'm a coffee addict. Sorry.
No. That, like you said, that was a lot of content in just a couple hours. So thank you for hanging with us. And this recording, is going to be available in a little bit. Actually, I should stop that recording.